We're live. I think you should shut the window if you can. This rooster is just not going to stop. This rooster is just... Okay. So what? Who cares? I'm talking about the rooster. It's like, okay, the rooster. I'm telling you, like, I have a rooster. What's the secret? You know? Hello, Joshua. Hello, Christian. And just gonna wait for some more people to come up. No, I don't think so. This? Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Christian, for that. Yes, people in Latin American countries, they tend to have more livestock in their backyards, which is cool because in America we don't have that so much. Hello, Sean. Did I ever watch pro wrestling as a kid? A little bit. And then we stopped watching it once we realized it was acting, but we thought it was real at one point in time. Can you recommend resources, books, videos to learn early church history? I would say the first place to go to would be Eusebius's Church History. It's one of the best books that you can read. It's a whole history book that goes from the time of Christ all the way to the reign of the Emperor Constantine. If you want some more than that, if you want something else to add to that, I would also read Constantine's. I would read, Eusebius's Life of Constantine. And then also another great book is Lactantius's The Death of the Persecutors, which was a history of the main persecutors of the church under the Roman Empire. And there's some more. If you want to get even deeper than that, you could read Socrates' Church History. You could read there's so many. I don't remember all of them, but I would start with Eusebius's Church History and then go on from there. Do you know martial arts? I did a little bit of it for a couple of years. I did kickboxing for a couple of years, but nothing really beyond that. How did Jesus appear to the Old Testament prophets? By appear, I mean, what did he look like? We don't know how he looked like. It doesn't say. There's a story in the book of Genesis where Abraham sees 3 men and he bows down to one because that one was Jesus Christ, but we don't know how he looked like. And then there's a story in the book of Exodus where God tells Abraham, I will show you my back. And Moses saw the back of God. Moses didn't see his face. So, um, and then you have the story of Adam and Eve, and they heard God walking. And then you have the story of the Tower of Babel, and it says that God walked in the city. Well, when does God walk? So we don't know how Christ looked like in the but to the New Old Testament prophets, we have something idea by looking at the Shroud of Turin, but that's about it. That's about it. Would Jesus and David look half Jordanian and rest Jewish? I have no idea. I think David had red hair or something, or he had ruddy skin. It was like a reddish complexion. Hello, Gary. Yeah. But speaking of Jews and the Middle East, I was reading Josephus. I've been reading his Jewish Wars and how the Jewish War began, and it's really interesting how that whole war sparked. Basically, it started as a conflict between Greeks and Jews in the area of Caesarea. The Jews basically believed that Caesarea belonged to them because the city was built by King Herod, and the Greeks of Caesarea said, no, it belongs to anyone who lives here. And the Jews said, no, it belongs to us. And so there was a synagogue in Caesarea, and the synagogue, the property of the synagogue was actually owned by a local Caesarean. I'm assuming he was Greek. And the Jews said, we'll buy the synagogue from you. And he refused to sell it. And there was a guy in Caesarea, I think he was a soldier, who really hated the Jews. And he went right in front of the synagogue and he sacrificed birds in front of the synagogue. And that angered the Jews so much because it made the synagogue impure. So this is one of the events leading up to the war. And also there was a procurator in Judea. His name was Gessius Flavus. And Gessius Flavus basically allowed Greeks to rob people, Greek marauders and criminals to rob Jews. And he was getting a cut of everything that was robbed. And then another thing that was taking place was you had political terrorism being done by the Sicarii, Jewish assassins, and they were murdering political figures and officials. And there was also a kind of a civil war that went on between the Jews of Galilee and the Jews of Samaria. The Jews of Galilee and the Jews of Samaria were actually murdering each other because supposedly there was a murder that was done in Galilee, and the Jews of there was a murder of a Samaritan in Galilee, or a Samarian. Samaria. We say Samaria, right? The people who live there are Samaritans, correct? So the Galileans were accused of that, and the Samaritans went into a Galilean village and just butchered the whole village, Sabra and Shatila style. And so there was a civil war that went on. So there was all this crazy chaos taking place leading up to the Jewish war. Another thing that I found out that I've never heard of before was that that Josephus talks about the Pharisees and what they believed in, and Josephus tells us that the Pharisees basically believed in reincarnation. So that's one thing. I was thinking about doing a video on that. I thought that was very interesting. So David didn't have blue eyes. I don't know. I have no idea. Caesarea, Israel, where Netanyahu personal home is there. Sure, yeah. I don't know, man. So for the sacraments, do Catholics look at them as a salvific means of grace? You wouldn't look at it as something you do to work your way to heaven.
They have the concept that Catholics believe that salvation comes by works.
The Catholics do?
Yeah, no. Protestants or evangelicals think that Catholics believe that by doing the sacraments, that's the way you get to heaven. It's not by grace alone, as Catholics do believe. So it emanates, the works emanates from the faith.
Right. Yeah, the Catholic faith is the Catholic faith, and part of that is the consumption of the Eucharist and going to confession and all that.
Yeah, it's like asking the evangelical, are you a Christian even though you didn't do the confession of faith, or you didn't do
right.
Are you Christian? How could you be Christian?
Right. So it's like an evangelical saying, man, I gotta talk more. It's like an evangelical saying that or asking, are you Christian because you didn't say a statement of faith or something like that.
Are they? When does a Christian become a Christian?
Sounds like the ancient version of Greek mafia. Sure, yeah. Ola, hello. Love your channel. Thank you. I read the 1962 Missal every day throughout the liturgical year. Do you think I'd benefit from reading the Douay Rheims front to back, or would the Missal's content suffice? It depends on what you want to do. Reading the Bible and reading the Missal are two very different things. Reading the Missal is something that brings about the occasion of Mass, of the Mass, whereas reading the Bible is going to give you a much deeper understanding of Christian history, the Christian faith, the roots of the Christian faith, etc. So it's just two different experiences. I read Flavius. No, it was Gessius Florus was the procreator of Judea at the beginning of the war. He didn't see I was being, okay, you're being sarcastic. Okay, I gotcha. Salvation comes from the Lord. I see. Okay. Anyway, you want to sit down here?
So salvation comes from the Lord.
Do you want to sit down here, or do you want us to answer people's questions?
I can sit there, Ted. It's up to you.
You can sit here.
Yeah. How does salvation come from the Lord? Salvation. Is that the discussion of the day? Salvation. So if Christ says, do this in remembrance of me, and you don't do this, can you give me the amounts there, Ted? Is that salvation? That's, he says, do this in remembrance of me. If Jesus says, do this and do that and do this and do that and do this and do that, and you don't do them, you have salvation. How so? He says, if you love me, you obey my commandments. So if you don't obey his commandments, do you truly love him? The master says, here's the do's, here's the don'ts, and you don't do them. How do you expect to have salvation? I don't understand that one. Where am I lost? So do we want to define salvation as a statement of faith with no do's? However, the do's don't bring you salvation. Only the grace of God brings you salvation. The mercy of God, no matter what you do, sacraments or anything, there is no salvation unless God has grace upon you. So we are saved through grace. Okay, the grace of God, that is. And, the salvation message is really, biblically speaking, is simple. And a lot of evangelicals think that it's so simple that they truly complicated it. Calvinism complicates the salvation message. And truly, that apostolic succession simplifies the message. The question is, Why is it so complicated when it comes to the salvation message? But when it comes to the prophetic message, which is complex, that the Protestant movement tried vehemently to simplify it to no avail, but failed miserably in many aspects, especially pinpointing, let's say, the harlot of Babylon. It's complex. The harlot of Babylon issue is complex. How do you decipher all the different allegoric prophecies in the scripture? It's complex. It's not simple. And so I think it's the reverse is what the Protestants did, is they really complicated the salvation message. We have systematic theology in which they undermined everything. And they undermined so many things in the scripture by choosing that, say, it's faith alone and scripture alone. It's never been faith alone, scripture alone that brings salvation. Are you telling me that you must have a Bible to be saved? What if you don't have a Bible? What if all you have is the book of Matthew? What if you have only the book of Luke? Are you not saved? He doesn't have the whole Bible. And so we can't really try to systematically understand salvation this way. Secondly, salvation is by action too. When he told Abraham, I'm going to show you a land, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to do this. When we told Noah, build an ark. Had Noah not built an ark, would he be saved? Answer is no, he would drown with the rest. And so you can't say that, works is not involved in the issue of salvation. It's not the reason for salvation, but it's a proof of salvation. You don't get married without buying a ring and having a wedding and promising your wife it, for better or for worse. If you don't do that, then it's not a marriage. It's cohabitation. It's something else besides a marriage. And so it's a covenant. You have to enter into a covenant. So we sit there and we argue over salvation issues when the salvation issues have been ironed out 2,000 years ago. Yet we always argue over, all the debates I see between Catholic and Protestant is over the doctrines of the Catholic Church versus the doctrines of the Protestant Church. And that's all I see them debating. But however, can a slanderer, he slanders, all his life is nothing but slandering. Are you saying this person is saved just because he professes Jesus? I'll give you an example. If I look at all the commentaries of the Protestant, they're pinpointing the papist as the harlot of Babylon. Well, that's proven to be false. We haven't had an Antichrist Pope. We haven't had the Catholic Church manifest as Mystery Babylon. So all these books and all these commentaries and all these prophecy books are nothing but slandering material. Are you telling me that you're going to meet God with all the slanders you made, or whoever made them, and all these hundreds of years of slanders, nothing but slanders? You're going to meet God and say, I'm okay because I did a salvation prayer? Slanderers, murderers, thieves, adulterers, homosexuals, all these will not enter the kingdom. What part of won't enter the kingdom do you not understand? So you can't have faith and all your life you've been slandering and claim that you believe in Jesus, because that's not the same Jesus. And so we have to understand Jesus to what he said he is. And he says, do this in remembrance of me. What is remembrance? If you look at the Bible and look at the word remember or remembrance, maybe I should give some examples. Let me find some examples here. Give me a minute to understand what remember means. Fine. Okay, I'll give example here. Christ foresaw what I was talking about in this book, the rise of Sodom. He was answering the disciples about his second coming in an Eastern mindset. Simply said about his second coming, remember Lot's wife. This very simple Eastern instruction is given to unlock much scripturally. Remember is not simply the opposite of forget. So an American reads the word remember, he thinks that, oh yeah, that's the opposite of forget, just to kind of remember. That's not what it means biblically or in the Eastern mindset. The Bible is written in an Eastern mindset. To remember Lot's wife requires that, one, there will be someday a Sodom. And two, remember Lot's wife always requires an action to flee Sodom and never look back. For example, on remember, we find, quote, that you may be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. Numbers 10:9. You may be remembered is an action of saving you from your enemies. Remembrance is inseparable from a resulting action. Quote, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Genesis 8:1. There's an action behind the word remember, always. Remembrance here is to cause. God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Another example, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities which Lot lived. Genesis 19:29. Here, to remember Abraham requires action. One, sent Lot out of Sodom. Two, God overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. There's an action. Similarly, God remembered Babylon. That's in the Apocalypse. He will send his church out of the midst of the cities, the overthrow. Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb to have birth. Genesis 30, verse 22. There was an action involved. For he remembered the holy promise and Abraham his servant, and he brought forth his people with joy and his chosen with gladness. Psalm 105, 42, 43. The same goes for do this in remembrance of me is an action, Holy Communion. That without this action, the transaction is null and void. This one word, remember, throws off the entire structure of Protestant essentials, since these become disobedient, faithless, lazy servants who says, oh, I don't need communion. This is a serious issue which Christ, you say, oh, it's not serious. Okay, well, if it's not serious, then tell us. Christ, Daniel, and John dealt extensively with this issue. And I expound this in my book. how Antichrist, through the seed of the Protestant Reformation, desecrates Holy Communion when God says, remember is a crucial covenant. So what does it mean for God when he says, remembered Babylon? Here it is. Quote, that's from John's Apocalypse. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered in the sight of God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Revelation 16, verse 19. Firstly, this verse alone proves Babylon is the cities of the nations, not just one city, that took the Sodom route. You can tell me how many cities took the Sodom route today, right? New York, you name it, Los Angeles. Secondly, his fierce wrath is the same. Quote, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So how do you suppress the truth in unrighteousness? By saying, oh, no, communion doesn't matter. Baptism doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's unrighteousness. So you suppress the truth in unrighteousness, and then you claim on top of it all that you're a saint. By golly, how are you a saint? Thirdly, because what may be known to God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. Not like you're ignorant. He makes it clear this judgment includes the fallen church who have known God. Finally, to remember Babylon pertains to the action required by both. 1, God's part, and the cities of the nations fell, is God's action against Babylon. And 2, our part, Lot's part, come out of her, my people, Revelation 18:4. So if we say, I am saved, I'm saved through Jesus Christ, the blood of the Lamb, and you don't come out of Babylon, you fail to listen to the instruction, what happens to you? You're saved? No, you're not. No, you're not, because you disobeyed. If you love me, you will obey my commandments. So we say, oh, is the obedience of the commandments is what saves you? No, it's not what saves you. It's the result of your faith. God gives you the grace of saving your hide. Here is another example how remember is used. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain. Oh, that should remind you of something here. Same thing as Mystery Babylon. And it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain that God remembered Abraham and set Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. I shared that one. When he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt is the same parallel as Mystery Babylon or Sodom and Egypt in Revelation 11, which is Jerusalem too, that the faithful must flee. And in fact, if that's not insignificant, if that is insignificant, even Christ himself said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you must flee, that all what has been written will be fulfilled. This is not the invasion of Titus over Jerusalem in the Jewish-Roman revolt. This is the ends of days before Christ comes. So he's saying to flee. So if you don't flee, what happens? If you're disobedient, what happens? You suffer the consequences. ignorance of God's law is no excuse. He's given you the law and the Bible. So you're against law. See, if you're against law, what does that make you? So I said, law is not important. If you're against law, are you against speeding law? Are you against traffic law? You're not. You follow the law. So you follow the speeding laws and the traffic laws, but you say, I don't really care about God's laws. Now, what kind of a rebel are you if you think this way? You see, that's the rebellion. That's the spirit of rebellion that you find in many of the comments I get all the time. You get this kind of snarty, smart aleck person who's makes insignificant anything. Nothing is significant,
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing is significant to these people. Nothing's important. I'm saved through the blood of Jesus, And this maniacal way of thinking, and Christ himself says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. You don't have knowledge about God. You don't have the knowledge. You don't pay attention, like I say all the time, you had ample many years to go to school. You seem to have become a dental assistant after years of working. You seem to have become a cashier, whatever you are, by training. You seem to have mastered whatever you do. You paid attention. And even when you married your spouse, you seem to pay attention and dress up nice and go out on the parties with them. And you seem to make attention to a lot of things in life, but you haven't paid attention to this very significant issue. That is the Bible. So when it comes to the Bible, you say Bible alone. The apostolic pays more attention to the Bible than the Protestant. Because what the Protestant does with the Bible is it makes it insignificant. So that's Old Testament. That's law. He files everything into utter unimportant. You see? And he makes sort of a booklet salvation, easy believism, in which he's damning himself or herself without knowing that they're on the way to destruction, thinking they're saints and thinking, I'm saved, and that's it. I don't need to do anything. I'm done with. And that's what they teach in all these churches in America. That's it. You're saved and that's it. Don't worry about anything. That's the lazy servant. I mean, what is laziness? Well, the boss comes and you're a cashier and you're sleeping on top of the cash register, not even caring about your job. That's lazy, So basically, what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to Eastern terminology or biblical terminology, the allegoric terminologies of the Bible, Westerners sometimes do not understand what does it mean to just the word remember. Or when Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me, that's a significant issue, that's a significant issue. I don't want to be baptized. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to confess. I don't want to take communion. I don't want to do any of these things. I'm saved. That's what happened. Now you got the non-denominational. I mean, there's no significance for anything. It's just whatever you bring to the swap meet in your thinking, and you become the interpreter, and you become the expositor. You become everything. Utter rebellion. Or you have a kind of a smorgasbord of all sorts of ideas that just mingle with each other, and there's no conformity to what a Christian should be. There's no conformity. And that's where we're heading. And that's part of this falling away. What other issues that you have to see? I'm seeing these things going upwards, and there is comments. And where did we leave off? Where did you leave off? What was the last one?
This one here. Amen. Here's the next one. Would you say God laid out a path?
Would you say God laid out a path to him, salvation, for a general majorative way through sacraments, but not universal BC.
Because BC is because.
Oh, I don't know the lingo, Ted.
Because if someone converts
and repents on deathbed, they can't get sacraments. What's the question, Ted? Can you interpret for me? I need an interpreter. This is written in King James. Let's see.
Hold on a second. Let me try to translate this.
Rusty Shackleford. What did you mean, Rusty?
Would you say God laid out a path to him for a general majorative way through sacraments, but not universal? Because if someone converts and repents on deathbed, they can't. He's trying to ask, I guess, like if somebody's dying, they can't have the sacraments. So,
this is the thing about anomaly. Somebody's dying. If the issue is salvation, we'll bring an anomaly. If somebody's dying on the bed and he doesn't receive sacraments, is he not saved or is he saved? Well, it's the same thing with the crucifix. With the one in the said, "Hey, remember me when you go to your father's house." He said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." What did that person do? We just said, "Remember me." Took action. Jesus answered the question with action. Remember me. So there's the remembrance, and he says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And he was saved. So did this person do much? He was a thief, so he repented. So we can't really structure salvation in this way. Say, salvation is this and this and this and that and this and this, because each case is different, and based on what you know is based on how God will judge you. That thief knew Christ in that incident where he was crucified and he was saved. And so the sacrament, there is in the Bible itself, if the elders come, the sick person confesses their sin, is anointed, and he dies, he's saved. So what's the problem with that? Here's the question. What is the problem with God making it so easy? He says, look, you're sick, you're dying, do this, and you're saved. God is really looking for any reason to save you. He wants to save you. He does not want to see anybody perish. And so he's giving you all kinds of ways to reach to heaven, to make it, to pass the test. So it's that simple. The salvation message is that simple. To say that the Orthodox and the Catholic believes in salvation by works is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. It simply does not exist. There is no Catholic or Orthodox says you're saved by works. You're saved by grace. In fact, those have a better way to look at it, not by faith, by grace, which is God's mercy. Faith, if you're saved by your faith, let me ask you this question. The process of faith is an action. It's energy. It's a work. How did you build your faith when you believed in Jesus? That was work. You read the Bible. That was work. Somebody witnessed to you and you thought about it. You couldn't sleep at night. That was work. Are you saying you're saved because of that faith, which is a work itself? That's how you made it to heaven? So it's salvation by grace alone. Not by faith alone. By grace alone. Look at the scripture. It doesn't say salvation by faith alone. Salvation by grace alone. Okay, what else is there, Ted?
Is it fair to say Protestants are closer to rabbinical Jews than Latin Greek Christians?
From the issue, look, the Jews don't believe the New Testament. They are close to the Jews when it comes to earthly Jerusalem, because you look at the Protestant interpretation, they really view Jerusalem. When you read the Old Testament, you see word Israel or Jerusalem, it's almost always the earthly Jerusalem. And that is a prophecy in itself that shows that there is a split, a schism within kingdom within the Christendom world. That one part of the schism goes that route of this earthly Jerusalem. While they do recognize in the New Testament, earthly Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem from the New Testament. But when it comes to the Old Testament, the Protestants by far look at many of these references in the prophecies as regarding when it says Jerusalem is really literally Jerusalem. For example, like I said before, take a look at Zechariah. In Zechariah, they think that Jesus is coming down to save Israel. But if you look at the prophecy, what does it say? It says the burden against Jerusalem. Your cities will be divided. The booty will be divided in your midst when the enemy comes. The burden against Jerusalem, anti-Israel. And so how is that saving the literal Jerusalem? In fact, there is no prophecy in the Old Testament. Find it. I dare anybody, they're out there. Find it. That God comes to rescue earthly Israel or earthly Jerusalem. That doesn't exist in the Old Testament. He comes to rescue heavenly, the people who belong to the party of the heavenly Jerusalem. And that's why in Zechariah it says very clearly, and then thousands of Judah will look towards Jerusalem and the people of Jerusalem and their God. What happened to the Jews of Tel Aviv? Don't they believe in the true God? Or the Jews of New York? Or the Jews of Haifa and Jaffa? The Jews of Acre? The other Jews all over the land of Israel? They don't have the true God? That's what it's saying. That finally they will recognize that the true God is with the people of Jerusalem. So what, the people of Jerusalem are very religious and the others are not? You don't have rabbis, religious rabbis in other cities? What is that about? They recognize that only the people in Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem, and their God. And that's how the remnant end up being saved. And so you can't really debate this issue. And I would love to debate any evangelical Protestant scholar out there. I would love to debate this issue, because that's really the crux of the whole matter between the apostolic and the evangelical or the charismatic movement evangelicals or the messianic evangelicals or the Protestants, is that they look at Israel and they say, well, there it is. It says Israel, But if you look very closely, you will find out it's not speaking of Israel, it's speaking of the Israel of God. And so it's all over the Old Testament. And this is why you can never consolidate these prophecies. You look at Micah 5, Israel is destroyed. You look at the famous Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. You see Israel in that one also destroyed. Even you see Armageddon, Jezreel. Okay, in the battle of Jezreel, it says Israel is destroyed. So how do you reconcile that with Ezekiel 38? With Psalm 83, And it's very simple. You reconcile it because really, in those chapters, it's talking about the remnant who finally joined the Israel of God, and God will rescue Israel, and thus all Israel is saved. Okay, so when it says all Israel is saved, are you telling me that the homosexual who's parading in the streets of Tel Aviv is saved? It's talking about all Israel of God saved from the utter catastrophe. So you can't escape it. When Paul talks about in Galatians 4, he has a dichotomy between two, the Jerusalem above and the Jerusalem below. And then he calls this Jerusalem below, in other words, the earthly Jerusalem, Hagar. And he says, you're not of the bondwoman. That's madness in Jewish thought. That if you join the earthly Jerusalem, you are of the bondwoman, Hagar. So the seed of Sarah, the physical, literal seed in this case, become the seed of Hagar. That's quite amazing. So God says, no, I'll switch it. I will switch it. I will make the children of the Gentiles to continue Israel. And that's the misunderstanding of many of the evangelicals. And then, so how do you take Galatians 4? How do you take Galatians 4 and then apply all the Old Testament prophecies? You can't ignore Galatians 4 and Romans, and when it's talking about God is going to establish a church. You can't take all these things in the New Testament and then don't properly apply the Old Testament in light of the New Testament. Even the evangelical agrees that the Old Testament must be interpreted in the light. The Old Testament must be interpreted in the light of the New Testament. What's the book of Hebrews all about? Is it about an ark, a physical box? Is it about a different ark? Is it about a physical temple? Not that there's something wrong with having physical temples. Or is it about a greater temple, the universal church? And so, is it about animal sacrifices? Or is it about the perpetual sacrifice that Malachi talked about? The daily sacrifice that is a continual sacrifice of Christ. So what do? You ignore the book of Hebrews. You drop everything in the book of Hebrews. All this instruction in Hebrews chapter 9, 10, 11, 12. You just ignore all these things and that's just out the window. That doesn't make sense. And then all of a sudden, then you read Jesus who says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, is that historic? Jesus is telling how he's coming. The abomination of desolation. Something is abominable going to happen, and it desolates the church. What are you going to do? You say, well, that's for the Jews. All of a sudden, Jesus began to apply the Jewish old temple. So now you just reversed it. You applied an ancient Old Testament ruling to interpreting the New Testament. That goes like this. That's in reverse. And this is one thing I couldn't consolidate as an evangelical. I couldn't rectify these issues. There's something is wrong with this concept of saying that all of a sudden Jesus is speaking of a Jewish temple and animal sacrifices. So what about Ezekiel's temple? Ezekiel's temple. You hear that? Well, that was a condition. If Israel obeyed, they would have this kind of a temple. Okay. But it didn't happen. Let's see, what else is dead? What do you have? Emmanuel Shaheed. God bless Brother Walid. Thank you.
You can just read them right here.
Brother Emmanuel, huh?
You can just read them on the side here.
Okay, where was the last time? We got Rusty Shacklefold, then King James 1611. Wow, you made that so clear. Wow, you made that so clear. Thank you, King James. John Samnite. When the book coming out? Oh, I'm excited for it. Oh my gosh, yes. I'm going to my final editing. That's, a Middle Eastern who doesn't speak English is his second language. So you're going to have to excuse a lot of my grammar. And I'm about in page 200 of my final editing. I got 400 pages left of my final editing. And it's basically complete, It's complete. Oh my gosh. When I started this, I didn't know so many things. I didn't understand so many things. We all have our theories about certain things. Each one of us have theories about certain things. We all have theories about how Christ comes. We have theories about the abomination of desolation. We have theories about all sorts of things. Some of us are pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, this trib, that trib, and all these things that you born out of the evangelical movement. And by the time I finished the research to write the book, my gosh, I corrected many things that I thought I had it right, and I had it wrong. I confess. You know, you read these. You see, the way you read these things is that you have to allow God to be the interpreter, not you. So you find something that you don't understand it. You got to find verses that clarifies those verses to understand it. So in fact, I discovered that really God interpreted the Bible for us in the Bible itself. We just have to kind of look for them. And you know, I drew my structure of how I understood things. And I read the Bible again and again and again and again. And it didn't match my structure. So I had to correct my structure and read it again and again and again. No, there's still something's missing. I still have it wrong. And corrected myself and then read it again. Okay. Once I got the structure correct, everything I read from the Bible, it matches perfectly what I concluded from the way I allowed God to correct me. See, and that's the attitude that you must have. You must be open that God corrects. If he takes us as a vessel and he forms us as the vessel he wants us to be, we have to be moldable, not stringent. You see? And that's the problem. You know, even the fathers. I mean, I look at what's his name from Bethlehem. Saint Jerome, you know. And Saint Jerome himself, he says, there will become one day who will unlock Daniel and Isaiah and Apocalypse. So then there are Catholics or Orthodox or, you know, who are stringent too. They say, you know, I'm not finding this in the church fathers. Well, you're not finding this in your church fathers because they never talked about it. The church fathers did not talk about everything in the Bible because they themselves did not understand everything in the Bible. Why? Because there's a prophecy in the Bible that says it's sealed. Daniel, for example, sealed. Apocalypse, sealed. Isaiah, sealed. Even Isaiah, sealed. A lot of it is sealed. So how could they interpret it for you? And then you say, I must find it in the church fathers. They're telling you that one day this will be unlocked. Okay. So that means, as far as commentary on the Bible and commentary on the prophecies of the Bible, we are up for some shock therapy of interpretation we have never heard historically. And that's what I was getting into. Things that are uninterpreted till today. But we understand them today. We do. They parade their sin like Sodom does. They do not even try to hide it. Do I need to interpret that one? They parade their sin like the Sodomites in Sodom, and they don't even try to hide it. If you don't understand what that means, then you're ignorant. We all understand what that means. But the question I have is that, how come nobody read it? How come I didn't see Franklin Graham read this? Don't read their Bible? I thought they're Bible thumpers. They read their Bible every day. You rulers of Sodom, you people of Gomorrah. Isn't Billy Graham reading that? I mean, Franklin Graham, all these. What are your main preachers in the evangelical circles? Or even the Pope. Is he not reading that? It's not just pick on the evangelicals. The cardinals don't read that. God, the beginning of Isaiah, he's greeting the world. He says the book is we can't unlock the book till the time of the end. And now we're close and we look at things around us. We go, my gosh, ape sleeping with ape. this must be something wrong. Open Isaiah. You rulers of Sodom, you people of Gomorrah. We begin to understand what it's talking about. And they go to chapter 3, they parade their sin like Sodom does. They don't even try to hide it. What kind of a parade is that at the city gates? Like Sodom. Shh. We're not supposed to say anything. Quiet. It's a headache. Oh my gosh. When Jesus says, remember Lot's wife, remember is a big word. Remember is a big word. And so that's why allegory is so crucial. And that's what the fathers kept telling us. If anything the fathers gave us is how the Bible, especially Augustine, how the Bible is unlocked by understanding parables, you see. And you had a split among the fathers. Some believed in the Chiliast or the millennial, so, and Augustine said no. I think that which one of the fathers were right, which one of the fathers were wrong? I think they were both right. You do have 1,000 years where Christianity basically subdued its enemies. When the 1,000 years were over, then comes Muhammad II, Gog Magog, Turkey, the Ottomans. 1452, right around after Constantine, around what? Yes, about 1,000 years. Then they came to the holy city, Constantinople. But then it says God chased them. That's the second time. God will chase them away. So there's been 1,000 years of reign of Christ, if you will. And God, finally unleashes, says after the 1,000 years are over, then Gog is loosened. Okay. He's loosened. He comes again. Why? Because it tells us in the prophecies, the 7th head is also the 8th, comes back again. And no matter how you look, I challenge anybody out there, anybody who wants to challenge me on this one, no matter how you look at the Old Testament prophecies, any of Old Testament prophecies, when it comes to the Assyrian, Gog, Antichrist, whatever you want to call it, King of Babylon, Pharaoh of Egypt, all these different symbolic things, Psalm 83, you name it, you name the prophecy. They all have one thing in common. They all are speaking of Gog and Magog. Every one of them is speaking of Gog and Magog. There's no question. That's why John mentions Gog and Magog. If you look at the armies of the north, the enemy from the north, the northern army, the book of Joel talks about the northern army. You look at Zechariah in chapter 9, Christ comes with the whirlwinds of the south and he goes and fights Ionia, Turkey. You look at, Jeremiah 49, 50, 51, Minni, Ararat, Ashkenaz. Where is Minni? Where's Ararat? Where is Ararat? I mean, do you need really this scholar to bamboozle you? Where is Ararat? Ararat isn't that where the Ark landed? A child knows the answer to that one. So if a child knows Ararat landed between Turkey and Armenia and Iraq, he's telling you, Minni Ararat Ashkenaz is going to come to destroy this mystery Babylon in chapters 49, 50, 51. And there he even talks about Israel. For their land was filled with sin. Flee from the land of Babylon. Wait a minute. The Jews live in Israel. God is calling Israel the land of Babylon too. And in Isaiah 21, there's Persia involved. And so if you take the destruction of Babylon in the Old Testament, And I dare any scholar to challenge me on that one. Anybody. You take Babylon's destruction in the Old Testament, all the prophecies about the destruction of Babylon. And there is Isaiah 13, there is Isaiah 21, Jeremiah 49, Jeremiah 50, Jeremiah 51, Isaiah 34, you name it. Okay, what you find is the same consolidated powers that are in Ezekiel 38, Meshech, Tubal, Ashkenaz, which is Minni, Ararat. So the same construct, no matter where you look at, is coming to that Babylon to destroy it. And no matter where you look, you find this Babylon that it's invading considers also Arabia and Israel are both this Babylon. And by the way, this is besides the Babylon in the northern hemisphere. There's the daughter of Babylon in the northern hemisphere that also must be rescued. It's another set of prophecies. My gosh. That God is going to bring us out of. So in essence, what you find is this, and this is something I never knew or understood, that God, even Peter, views the church as a continuation of Israel, as they are scattered sons of Israel. And they dwell in Egypt and in Babylon. And then he rescues them out of Egypt, just like ancient Israel was rescued out of Egypt. He rescues them out of Babylon, just like Cyrus the Great rescues them out of Babylon. And here's the amazing thing you'll end up finding, which I never understood. If you read Isaiah 45, look at Cyrus, you find out there is elements about the Cyrus that are not Cyrus, that are Jesus himself. People will come in shackles and pray for you and worship you and say, we know that you are God. That's not Cyrus. That's Kurush. First, you pronounce it wrong. It's not Cyrus, it's Kurush. Christo. Where Christ, the name itself, comes from this. It simply means disc, round disc. And so, the Eucharist looks round like a disc. Biblically speaking, the Catholic Eucharist is the perfect resemblance of the biblical Kurush. And so you find Isaiah chapter 11. God, please, don't just listen to me. Go and read. Write it down. Isaiah chapter 11. And tell me, what is Isaiah 11 talking about? It's talking about an exodus. And God says there will be another exodus. People look at this text and no scholar today can answer the question, what second exodus of Israel? This is not speaking of Israel. Speaking of somebody else. It's speaking of the continuation of Israel coming out of mystery Egypt, which John the Apostle calls, remember, Jerusalem, Sodom, and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. People need to be rescued out of Israel itself. It's reversed. Israel become Babylon. Paul said that become the bondwoman. And now he rescues his people out of Egypt. Allegoric Egypt. And he says, I will dry the 7 streams of Egypt. Can anybody tell me where are the 7 streams of Egypt? There is no 7 streams in Egypt. The Nile had 7 streams long ago. 5 of them dried during the Pliny. Long time ago. There's no 7 streams of Egypt. So that's why the biblical critics will say, there's no 7 streams in Egypt. See, the Bible is wrong. The Bible's got contradictions. It's full of contradictions. Whenever you think that the Bible has contradictions, look at the mirror. You are the contradiction. The 7 streams. Isn't the beast have 7 heads? He says he will strike the 7 streams and rescue his people. And it calls them Gentiles. They will have the banner of Jesse. Gentiles. When was Israel Gentile coming out of Egypt? And he says, another exodus, second exodus. God saying that, not me, God. My gosh, I began to realize there's coming an exodus. This message is the message of Noah to prepare an ark. It's not something light. This is a message that the whole world needs to hear. This is a message that every Christian must hear. There's a coming exodus out of America, out of Israel, out of all these lands, into the wilderness. And I saw the woman, she goes to the wilderness. What, you think the Pope is going to stand on the Vatican window and tell you this? I wouldn't doubt, and to be frank, I wouldn't doubt that if Enoch and Elijah came, I wouldn't doubt one iota that the Vatican will say these are madmen. What scholar today wants to be labeled as an apocalyptic madman? See, he's a how do they say when they make fun of people who they're apocalyptic or they're
Apocalyptic.
yeah, they're he believes that doom and gloom. No one wants to be painted as a doom and gloom messenger, and so all these scholars, they want to interpret the scripture as they should interpret. I looked at some of the Catholic interpreters. I'm not talking about fathers. I'm talking about modern interpreters. I was like, my gosh, there is no difference between their interpretation with the Protestant interpretation. And so you have an exodus in Isaiah chapter 10. You have a conversion and an exodus in Isaiah also 45, in which Egypt is restored. Egypt will give a sacrifice. It says it right there, read it. The Egyptian will give a sacrifice and an offer to God, a sacrifice. Remember, a sacrifice has to have a deal, with God. It's called nither in the Bible. Nither or nizr. Look at the Hebrew. And I look at the Hebrew and the Aramaic and I go, my gosh, this is my village's language. I know what a nizr is. A nizr is a sacrifice. But a nizr in our culture is a sacrifice where there's a deal. God, I offer sacrifice, rescue me. Offer sacrifice, have my wife have a boy. My son is in the hospital. I want the cure for him. I offer a nizr, a sacrifice. So a nizr. Oh, wait a minute here. His name will be called Nazarene. Nizri. Oh my gosh. All these scholars are arguing, comes out of Nazareth, that all the prophecies about Christ we call the Nazarene. He is a sacrifice. His name is sacrifice. Christ's name is sacrifice. He came out of Nasra, victory. He came out of Nasra, victory. So that what all the prophets said, he will be a sacrifice because the sacrifice is the victory. Matthew could have never chosen a better word. I'm telling you, it blinds my mind how so-called scholars are not able to unlock the simplest book of the Bible. The Apocalypse truly is the simplest book. It, to me, I found out it is the most simplest book to unlock. John made it so simple. It is simple. It is so simple to understand the Apocalypse, all of it from beginning to end. You read, he repeats the whole cycle for you. And then he goes into the other chapter, he repeats the whole cycle for you from beginning to end. And he repeats the whole cycle for you again. It's a Middle Eastern style of repeating so you can understand and comprehend different ways of pictorials he puts for you so you can comprehend it all. And that's why I wrote it down for you. And hopefully I want to finish it so I can send it to all of you. So you can send it to your friends and your friends send it to their friends. And I urge you to try to find the error. Now, when I speak, I make errors. When I write, I try not to make errors. So last time I was in Sam Shamoun's and I said something, that was an error. I said it was a Calvinist who built the super canon.
I made the mistake.
You made it.
Yeah.
The historian made the mistake. So, but it's nice that I could slap it onto you and pass the buck. So anyway, I rambled on. I apologize. It's been an hour. Okay, let's take some questions, Ted.
Have you ever heard of the prophecy? Just read them.
Okay, Pano Costorus. And I'm sorry we didn't take phone calls because the phone calls, the calls, it trumps the internet connection. Right now we're doing fine. There's no problem. As soon as you open the calls, it just messes up everything. So we can't do it. We apologize. We just could not do it. Doesn't work. Okay, sorry. Let me read it again. Go ahead, read it again.
Okay, hold on. This is here. God bless you, Walid and Ted. Keep the God's work you do, bringing us light by interpreting and making understandable the Bible scriptures. Greeting from Bulgaria. Well, hello there. Hi, Walid. It's great listening to you. It's from Hugo Hein. King James. Okay, have you read that? Cherry picking the Bible is problem in Protestant churches. Okay. They lost the temple sacrifice and the priesthood. God transferred that to the church, and they just became a debating society. Yeah, pretty much. What Bible translation do you recommend? I don't know. ESV.
I use all translations because I recommend the Hebrew. That's where I go to. I go to the Hebrew. I go use the Arabic, and I see which translation has it the best, and I choose that one. So, we always argue over Bible translations. King James, New King James, this ASV, NASB. Jesus used what he had. He didn't say read this translation or that translation. Okay. What else? To this day, the evangelical and modern Judaism had no clue or have ignored what had happened in the light of cutting out parts of the Old Testament. To this day, the evangelicals and modern Judaism had no clue.
Siri, can you buy it in the form of a book? I'd like to
cut out parts of the Old Testament, ignoring what happened after the apostles. I think by his saying cut off the old parts of the Old Testament, is saying not using all the books. What else do you have?
Hello, God bless. It's from Giuseppe. What are the major differences between a Gulf Arab and a Levantine Arab and North African Arab?
North African Arabs are Moors. They have a different language. They're what you call biblical Fut or Libya in the Bible. They're of a Hamitic origin, not of a Semitic origin. But they speak some sort of Arabic that is not easy sometimes to understand. And so their language or their dialect sometimes is difficult for us. But they speak classical Arabic, which is the Arabic that all Arabs speak. And so what's the purpose of the question? I'm trying to understand.
There's no purpose.
There's no purpose. Okay.
Walid, have you heard of the prophecy of World War III and the sleeper saint?
No, Mr. Castoros, I didn't hear about the prophecy of World War III and the sleeper saint. But if you send it to me, I'd be glad to read it. I can look it up.
It does talk about army of the north, and that is Turkey.
That's basically what it is.
Remember and do it as a. So Titus Bagoni says, remember and do it as a rehearsal. The communion is a rehearsal.
Yes, correct.
It's a rehearsal?
What do you mean rehearsal? I mean rehearsal all the time is what he means by rehearsal.
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's what he means. But
I hope so. What if Saudi Arabia is the she of Babylon, rich with oil? See, now we can see, what if it's Saudi Arabia? What if it's this? What if it's that? We're trying to pinpoint a specific spot. That's when you get into tunnel vision. And that's, I had that tunnel vision. It's Saudi Arabia. No, it's not only Saudi Arabia. Okay. So I asked last week the question in Genesis chapter 10. It says, Kalla, the cities of Babel were Kalla, Nineveh, Kalne, Arach, Aqad. Which one of them is the great city? It says these are the great city, called all of them collectively the great city. So if I tell you, is Kalle the great city? You say no, it's all of them collectively together. Yeah, but still Kalle is one of the great cities. It's still called the great city. And so it's a conglomerate. If I say, is Sodom only Sodom? But Sodom and Gomorrah were several cities. Which one of them is Sodom? You see? And this is the problem with this tunnel vision of looking at the prophecies of the Bible. It's Saudi Arabia. It's New York. The best answer is it's all the above. What else do we have then?
Orthodox Study Bible is great verse by verse. The notes are from the Church Fathers, for example, applies the laws in the Old Testament to Jesus. Okay.
Okay, good one. It's called what? Orthodox?
Orthodox Study Bible.
Orthodox Study Bible. Okay.
There are many candidates of would be she of Babylon in history, which is the right one, which fulfills it.
Which is what?
The question is, there's many Babylons in history, so which one is the right one?
All of the above. All of the above. Okay. Just Babylon alone, I have 150 pages explaining Babylon. So unless I unravel 150 pages to explain it all, because we've got to start from the beginning, where the problem is. The beginning is not understanding Genesis chapter 10. Now we go to all the different parts of the Bible where Babylon is mentioned, and we begin to unlock each piece and each one, whether it's in the Apocalypse, whether it's in the Old Testament, and to take a look what God is telling us. And what we find out is that there is multiple pieces to this Babylon. Another problem that people do is that when they look at the beast construction, they think that, oh, okay, so we have a beast coming out of Turkey. What is that going to be? How's that going to beat America, man? Come on. Are you out of your mind? That they don't understand that what we're dealing with here is not just Turkey. What we're dealing here is a conglomerate of nations from the north, allied in the Neo-Ottoman movement. And then there is a beast. So this is kind of a beast, okay? But then what about the harlot that he lifts? The harlot is the one in control. She rides, okay? He lifts this harlot up. It's on his back. What about the harlot? What we need to understand is that what we're looking at here is a collective manifestation of both the Babylon the Great and this beast. Nowhere in the scripture is talking about just, no, I shouldn't say that. As it's in the Apocalypse, when it describes the threat to John, nowhere does he describe only a harlot or a beast. He describes them collectively together. So if this harlot, it's not just called Mystery Babylon as you think. It's also Mystery Sodom, Mystery Egypt. So it's the world of Sodom too that's involved. That controls basically this entity. We have a huge system, a humongous system that is involving mega nations, mega powers, that the beast sort of symbiotically begins to work with the harlot, but eventually there's a revolt between the two. There's a fallout, if you will. So if you want to take Turkey and its allies, and that's all the southern republics of Russia and Persia, and all the different Libya, Egypt, after he conquers them, there's still some ways to go here. Okay, because that's a threat. And the Islamic world, that's a major threat. But then it's sort of in the beginning controlled by the harlot. Well, who's controlling the Muslim world today? Really, come on, it's NATO. NATO is the one that allows Turkey to do anything it wants. And so that whole thing, that structure is massive. It becomes massive. Then when it falls apart, you see, that's when all hell breaks loose. Okay, what else do you have?
Catholic scholars play it safe when it comes to prophecy, a snooze fest to read.
Catholic scholars play it safe. I agree with you. Catholic scholars also reading their stuff is a complete bore.
How does the church make a doctrine? Can you make a doctrine if it's only one time in the Bible? Yeah, actually, I don't see.
Can you make a doctrine if it's mentioned only once in the Bible? Okay, well, the virgin birth. How many verses do you have about the virgin birth? Do you believe in the virgin birth? Where did you get that from the Bible? No. Alma, it says young maiden. That's not a virgin birth. Where do you get the virgin birth? In the Old Testament. The New Testament, yes. But in the Old Testament, it's not easy to find the virgin birth. And that's one thing I get into in the book, explaining the virgin birth from the Old Testament. There's many places. What else is there?
The empire was a vast amount of land, including Turkey, Syria.
The empire was vast amount of land. Yes, vast amount of land.
Our female dwarf goat just had one baby. May deliver another.
Congratulations.
Hold on, I gotta say something. That is probably your best comment so far. This is the first time. I've always wanted milk goats, but I must say this is the very first time in a long time that you have not brought up Brendan O'Connell. So I'm very, very happy for you. Congratulations on your goat.
Let us adjourn it.
I think we're done for tonight. Yes.
Yes.
It's been over an hour. Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
God bless.
I'll keep making videos. Bye-bye.